Queen Elizabeth I, the mighty Gloriana, ruled England with incredible strength. 444 stormy years, but she was more than just a queen. She was like a force of nature she stood firm against. Powerful rulers like Philip II of Spain crushed the strongest naval attack Europe had ever seen, the Spanish Armada, and survived endless dangerous plots that would have destroyed weaker leaders. She was the last bright star of the Tudor family, the Virgin Queen who used her power like a sword and changed England's fate forever. Yet despite all her power, she feared one thing more than anything: what might happen to her body after death. And centuries later, her tomb would be open to reveal a terrifying secret that still chills the blood every day of Elizabeth's reign. Was like walking a tightrope over deadly danger. Enemies were everywhere: Catholic fanatics who called her a heretic deserving death, foreign rulers plotting her fall, and traitors even within her own family. The greatest threat was her own cousin, the beautiful but doomed Mary, Queen of Scots. When Elizabeth finally signed Mary's death warrant, it haunted her for the rest of her life. Beneath her famous powdered face, behind the image of strength, was a woman tormented by a fear few could imagine: the horrifying fate that might await her corpse in the cruel 1500s. Embalming was not a gentle way to preserve the body. It was a brutal process. Picture it: cold stone slabs, sharp knives, and the violation of sacred flesh. The body was cut open, organs ripped out without care, and the empty spaces stuffed with strong-smelling spices. A desperate attempt to fight off the stench and rot that came for every dead body. Elizabeth was terrified of this. She begged her doctors to leave her body untouched and whole. She wanted to meet God as she had lived, pure, untouched, and still a queen, even in death. But once her life ended, her power vanished with her last breath. On March 24, 603, Elizabeth died. Her powerful will could no longer protect her. Her body was placed on the cold embalmer's table. The royal surgeons didn't treat her with kindness, only cold necessity. Their sharp blades cut deep into her flesh. They tore open her chest, her heart, the symbol of her courage, was pulled out. Her liver, intestines, everything inside her was removed. The empty space was then packed full with cloves, myrrh, cinnamon, and rare herbs. This wasn't a tribute, it was a desperate battle to stop the body from rotting too fast. The embalmed knew the horrible truth: without this gruesome treatment, her corpse could swell up like a balloon. Gases would build inside her coffin like a bomb if the coffin burst during her grand funeral, as had happened to others before. The queen's rotten insides might explode in front of her mourning people. The embalming was not honor, it was a terrible delay of her body's decay. After the gruesome work, Elizabeth's body was wrapped in heavy crimson velvet embroidered with Tudor roses and placed inside a thick lead-lined coffin. Her final journey began. The royal barge carried her down the rivers while thousands of grief-stricken people lined the shores, but they were mourning ally. The people walking beside her coffin were secretly terrified. Despite all the embalming, the gases of decay still found ways to escape, slipping through tiny cracks in a lead. A sickly sweet smell of death clung to the barge, an invisible, terrible companion riding alongside the Virgin Queen. If the coffin had fully broken open, England would have witnessed an unspeakable horror: their beloved Gloriana exploding in a shower of rotting flesh on the sacred river. But the lead coffin barely held this time. At Westminster Abbey, Elizabeth was laid to rest in a grand tomb, but even here her story wasn't finished. Nearly 300 years passed in the late 1800s. Driven by Victorian curiosity, Dean Arthur Stanley received Queen Victoria's permission to open the sealed tombs beneath the abbey. Holding a shaking lantern, Stanley climbed down into the pitch-black underground chambers. The air was cold, thick, and heavy with the stink of centuries-old decay. He entered the darkness where England's greatest queen had been forgotten. What Stanley found was horrifying. Elizabeth's once grand coffin was falling apart. The wooden outer layer had rotted into dust. The beautiful crimson velvet was now nothing but brittle scraps. Even the lead shell, her last protection, had bent, twisted, and sagged under the weight of what lay inside. The smell was unbearable, wet, ancient, and filled with the stench of long dead flesh. After centuries, the air still reeked of her decaying body. On the broken lid, Stanley could barely see the faded carving of the Tudor rose and the faint letters E.R. Elizabeth Regina, a quiet whisper of her former glory inside a tomb filled with rot. But there was something even worse resting above Elizabeth's broken coffin was the crumbling remains of her half-sister and enemy Mary, the first, known as Bloody Mary. In life, they had torn England apart with religious war and hatred. And death, they now shared the same airless dark vault. Locked together forever, Stanley stood, frozen, surrounded by the physical remains of their bitter feud. The silence was heavy, not empty, full of the weight of centuries of slow, shared decay. There was no sound, no one else, just the remains of two rival queens trapped together in a final embrace of rot beneath the stone, while many others, buried long ago, had turned into nothing but dust. Elizabeth's violent embalming had only slowed the decay. The lead coffin, once meant to protect her, was now swelling and bulging horribly from the gases still trapped inside. The oak had disappeared. The velvet was gone, yet pieces of her defiance remained. The Tudor rose, the initials, but beneath the ruined metal and decayed finery was the truth that no one can escape. Her body was now only broken bones, rotted flesh, and the final remains of nature's cruel work. At that moment, Arthur Stanley did what time itself had not done for 300 years. He opened Elizabeth the first stinking coffin, and what he saw was not the glorious Virgin Queen, but a gruesome reminder of what death does to everyone, even the creator of England's golden age, the untouchable Gloriana, who once commanded kings and nations, was now nothing more than collapsing bone, disintegrating velvet, rotting wood, and twisted poison lead. The cold air carried one final royal scent, the smell of centuries of slow, unstoppable rot. Today, tourists walk across the shiny floors of Westminster Abbey, completely unaware of the horror below them. They admire the statues and grand monuments, not knowing the dreadful secret beneath their feet. They breathe clean air, free from the deadly gases that once seeped up from the tomb. They hear choirs singing, not the crushing silence of that black vault. Elizabeth's grand tomb still stands as a symbol of power, but beneath its peaceful surface lies the ugly truth: a rotting coffin, misshapen and dangerously fragile. It is an everlasting, chilling message written not in stone, but in decay. No crown, no empire, no legend can protect even the greatest ruler from death. Flesh rots, lead bends, velvet turns to dust. Queens and paupers alike are devoured by time. Even the grandest empires become nothing more than a feast for worms. Elizabeth, who once ruled oceans and empires, who outmaneuvered assassins and kings, now lies in a silent, rotting vault. Her body reduced to fragile remnants and decaying velvet. Her legacy endures in books, portraits, and legend, but the flesh that once bore the weight of a crown has long surrendered to the forces of nature. Time is the final monarch, and none, not even the Virgin Queen, can escape its reign. If you enjoyed this video, do well to subscribe, leave your comments, and give us more video suggestions.